Hey everyone and welcome. So, you're renting in British Columbia. Doesn't matter if you're a landlord or a tenant, you're playing in a game with some very specific rules. And believe me, you want to know those rules. Get them right, and everything's smooth sailing. Get them wrong? Oof, it can cost you thousands. So today, we are going to break down the entire life cycle of a tenancy. We're going to turn all that confusing legal stuff into a simple roadmap that you can actually use. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll cover the absolute basics, the rule book. Then we'll walk through how to start a tenancy off on the right foot, what the day-to-day looks like, how to end things correctly, and finally, what happens when you just can't agree. First up, let's get the lay of the land. In BC, every single rental is governed by one core rulebook and one official referee. Getting to know them isn't just a good idea, it's absolutely essential. Now here's something you really need to get. This legal framework, it overrules any handshake deal or verbal agreement you might make. It's designed to be balanced, right? To protect the landlord's property and the tenant's home. Honestly, knowing these rules is the single best way to make sure things go smoothly right from day one. Think of the RTA as the ultimate instruction manual. Seriously, it covers everything. How a lease has to be written, exactly how much a deposit can be, who's responsible for fixing that leaky faucet, and all the legal steps for an eviction. If you've got a question about your tenancy, the answer is almost definitely in the RTA. And if the RTA is the rulebook, then the RTB is the referee. They're the official government body. They provide all the forms, they help clarify the rules, and, this is the big one, they make legally binding decisions when landlords and tenants just can't see eye to eye. Okay, with the rules in place, let's jump right to the very beginning of the relationship. How you start a tenancy is so often the best predictor of how it's going to end. Getting these first steps right is absolutely critical. And this isn't just, some friendly advice. It's a really hard-learned lesson for some folks. We saw one story about a landlord who was in a huge rush to fill a unit. They skipped the proper screening, and guess what? They ended up over $6,000 in the hole from unpaid rent and damages. That is a massive, costly mistake that, honestly, could have been totally avoided. So the takeaway here is pretty simple. For landlords, you need a consistent, fair, and thorough screening process for every single applicant. And for tenants, have your credit check, your pay stubs, and your references ready to go. It just shows you're a serious contender. And for everybody, please remember, discrimination based on family status, age, or ethnicity isn't just unfair, it's flat out illegal. Look, a handshake agreement is almost impossible to prove in a dispute. That's exactly why the law demands a written lease, and why smart landlords always use the official BC standard form. It covers all the legal bases. But what about your specific rules, like no smoking on the balcony or parking is in stall 52? All of that has to be written into the additional terms section. If it's not in that agreement, it is not an enforceable rule, period. This is a hard and fast rule. A landlord can ask for a security deposit, and if pets are allowed, a separate pet damage deposit. But each one can't be more than half of 1 month's rent. So asking for a key deposit or a damage deposit or last month's rent, nope, none of that is allowed under BC law. So why does this one little report matter so much? Because this thing is the #1 piece of evidence if there's a fight over damages when you move out. If a landlord fails to do this report with the tenant at move-in, they could completely lose their right to claim any of the security deposit for damages. It's that important. Okay, the lease is signed. You're all moved in. Now we're in the longest part of the tenancy. And this phase is all about mutual respect and really understanding what your rights and duties are. You can really see the balance of responsibilities here. Just think of it like this. The landlord takes care of the bones of the building, the structure, the heat, the plumbing, to keep it safe and livable. The tenant's job is to maintain their own space and fix anything they or their guests break. And wrapped around all of this is this key idea of quiet enjoyment for everyone. And this goes right to that right of quiet enjoyment and privacy. A landlord can't just pop in whenever they feel like it. Unless it's a real emergency like a fire or a huge flood, they have to give you at least 24 hours of written notice. And that notice has to say why they're coming and give a reasonable time for entry. Now, this is one of the most regulated parts of a tenancy. A landlord can't just wake up and decide to raise the rent. They have to follow all 3 steps perfectly. It's got to be a full 12 months since the last increase. They must use the official government form, and they have to give a full 3 clear months of notice. Miss any one of those steps and that increase, it's invalid. Sooner or later, every tenancy comes to an end. Doesn't matter if it's been 1 year or 10 years, the rules for moving out are just as strict as the ones for moving in. A landlord can't end a tenancy just on a whim. They need a valid legal reason. And as you can see, the amount of notice they have to give depends on that reason. Just 10 days for unpaid rent, a month for more serious issues, and 2 months if the landlord needs the place back for their own use. But here's the crucial part for tenants. When you get one of these notices, a clock starts ticking. You have a very specific and usually pretty short window of time to dispute it with the RTB if you think it's unfair or illegal. Okay, you'll want to pay really close attention to this timeline because the consequences here are serious. So, the moment a tenancy is officially over and the tenant gives their forwarding address in writing, a 15-day clock starts ticking for the landlord. Within that little window, they have to do one of 3 things: give the deposit back, get the tenant's written okay to keep some of it, or file a formal dispute. And if they miss that deadline, the penalty is, well, it's steep. They might have to pay the tenant double the entire deposit. Yeah, double. And finally, what happens when things really go wrong and you just can't work it out? Well, BC has a formal system designed to solve these conflicts fairly and, most importantly, legally. This is the only legal way to do it. Taking matters into your own hands, like a landlord changing the locks or a tenant holding back rent because they want a repair done, is totally illegal and it will backfire on you. The right way is to apply to the RTB. You submit your evidence, you attend a hearing, and a neutral arbitrator makes a final, legally binding decision. And that decision can be enforced by the courts if it has to be. So, when you boil it all down, the rules we've covered aren't really there to favor one side or the other. They're designed to create fairness and predictability for everybody. Knowing your rights and responsibilities isn't just about trying to avoid a fight. It's about being able to navigate your rental relationship with confidence. Because in BC's rental world, knowledge isn't just power, it really is peace of mind.